are about to review Chapter 2 for the Security Plus 701 exam. So there are a few things that stuck out to me. I'm don't go over that stuff, but there were a lot of things that it's like good to know, but not necessarily like something that you need to study. You know what I mean? So I'll go over like the meat and potatoes of it. So first and foremost, they discussed the CIA triad, which if you don't know, that's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And when it comes to confidentiality, this is ensuring that only the people with the necessary authorization and permissions can access information. So you can do this by having encrypted files, and only people with those keys can access it. Access controls like badging in or something like that. So again, people with the necessary authorization and permissions is confidentiality. When it comes to integrity of data, this is ensuring that the data is accurate, and that it's consistent and trustworthy. So basically saying that this data has not been tampered with, it's in its original form, and you can trust it. That's data integrity. And then the availability portion of that means that the systems or data is basically available when you're trying to access it. And this comes into play with redundancy. So that's like system duplication, RAID backups, load balancing, etc. All these things ensure that data is available regardless of what's going on. So when it comes to like ransomware, you want to make sure that you have a good backup, because if you have that system duplicated or that image, who gives a fuck if they have your shit held in ransom? You don't gotta pay that shit. Redundancy matters. So that's why you want to have these options available, because you just never know what will happen. So that is the CIA triad. Another thing that I think is important to know is the triple alpha framework. So that is authentication, authorization, and accounting. So authentication pretty much is identifying a user or a system. And it's pretty much saying and verifying that you are who you say you are. You've been authenticated. When it comes to authorization, this is determining if a user or a system even has the permission to access this information. So that's coming down to like role-based access controls. That's coming down to privileged users, general users, etc. So are you authorized to even look at this shit? Accounting, it's not accounting how you think, like checks and balances, numbers. No. For accounting in the Triple Alpha framework, this is basically accounting for their actions, because in this phase, you're going to be logging and monitoring activity like data usage, what a user does during the session. So I would just think of like Big Brother. They always watching. That's accounting. Then another thing that they discussed was authorization models. I know a lot of us are actually familiar with MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, but there are other authorization models. One is single factor authentication, SFA. You have two-factor authentication, 2FA. Then you have MFA, like I said, for multi-factor. And then you have risk-based authentication, which is RBA. I would just remember those. They didn't go into too much detail about it. They just said, this is what it is. Remember this. So, then a big one that we talked about in chapter 2 is gap analysis. And pretty much what a gap analysis is, it's taking the current state of whatever, a system, a process, procedure, whatever, the current state, and comparing that to the desired state. And then the difference between the current and the desired, that's going to be where you do your gap analysis and basically finding out what is it going to take for us to get from the current state to the desired state. That's the gap analysis. And then another big one during this chapter was the zero trust security concept. And it's really as easy as it sounds. The zero trust security concept is basically saying that regardless if it's internal or external, we're not trusting it until we prove that we can. So by default, zero trust means that you can't trust anything until it's been authenticated, authorized, and validated. That's zero trust. So whenever you hear that, just know if they're like, we follow a zero trust model, it's like, regardless of what the fuck is going on, we're treating you as a threat until it's proven otherwise. That's how you remember that. Then they got into some network architecture. They were talking about the control plane. And for those of you who don't know, the control plane focuses on like routing and traffic control of information, really like of packets. If you don't know what a packet is, look it up. And this is essentially where decisions are made. So it's like, is this packet going here? Is it going there? Is it getting denied? What's going on? And there are a few different methods and strategies associated with the control plane. From top to bottom, you have adaptive identity, threat scope reduction, policy-driven access control, secure zones, policy engine, and the policy administrator. And I'm going to touch on all of those real quick because I don't want you to be like, okay, you said it, but what the fuck does that mean? Because I know people do that shit all the time. It's like, bitch, that's why I'm here watching your fucking video. You don't want to go into the motherfucking information. Anywho, so when it comes to adaptive identity, this is a method that identifies users or a system based on the behavior, the location, or that device. And it basically ensures a continuous evaluation amongst the changing conditions. So I think this can be remembered by like Netflix now. If you have Netflix and you're on your family Netflix, or you're the friend with the Netflix, everybody logging in, how it's like, are you logging in? And it'll be like you're logging in from Minnesota, but your account originated in Pennsylvania. That's the location. They're like, is this you? Let us know if it's you or not, because we'll block this shit. That's adaptive identity. And then also, I think another one is, that's the location, the device. So how sometimes you have your device associated with like a certain website or, app or something like that. And they'll be like, we don't recognize this device. That's adaptive identity. And it's like, oh no, I got a new phone, girl. Don't worry. It's me. When it comes to threat scope reduction, I feel like that is literally in the name. You're reducing the scope of the threat. Pretty much this strategy limits the potential damage that can occur from a hack. And that's pretty much it. Policy-driven access control is a system that grants organized access to a network and its resources. And that's based on policies that were put in place by the policy administrator. And the policies can be like role-based access. So if you're a general user and you're trying to, change a configuration or something, you're not going to be able to do that because you don't have that access assigned to you. That is an admin or privileged user account that can do that, not just your regular ass login, like your run-of-the-mill ass shit. You can't do that. Also like data type and classification. This is easy to remember, like military. So, you have your different levels of classification. You have like, public, internal, confidential, highly confidential. So those are the different classifications. If you only have the authority to access the confidential information and you're trying to get into the highly confidential or the top secret information, that's not gonna happen. You're gonna get, an error. It's gonna be a motherfucking sign that's like, halt, bitch, you can't come in here. You're not authorized. Try again. But don't try again because you're still not getting in. So that is the the data type when it comes to like policy driven. So if you don't have the access or the permissions, you're not getting into that shit, regardless of what it is. Then they're saying when it comes to security zones in the zero trust architecture, security zones are basically little segments of a network, like you could think of like 4s or 2s or something, whatever. So in this segment of the network, all the information should be similar in like data classification, risk level, etc. Because say this is just general information. You don't want the general information to be mixed up with the highly confidential information because that's going to be a discrepancy. And, if this general gets hacked or, it gets exposed, that means that also now the highly confidential mixed in with the general is getting exposed. So that's why they try to keep the security zones kind of similar in what's in each of them. So yeah, what I have here is security zones are sections of a network where resources have similar risk levels and data classifications, ultimately minimizing the effects of a potential breach to that zone. So pretty much what I said, I just dressed it up nicer in here. When it comes to policy engine, that is a central component in the data plane that makes decisions about access requests based on the policies that were put in place by the policy administrator. So these decisions include accessing network resources, under what conditions they can access them, and how long, and how access is logged and monitored. So that's the policy engine. In my mind, that's like what keeps it going. And again, that's the central component. That's why I'm like, what keeps it going? That's the center of it all. Then for policy administrator, that to me is a self-explanatory term. Pretty much the policy administrator is the person that's responsible for putting policies in place and managing the policies. The policies can include identity, nature of a requested security source, the status of that device, etc. So again, the policy administrator is just the person who's responsible for managing and enforcing the policies that are in place for an organization. Another thing that I think was important was the policy enforcement point. PEP, PEP. Pretty much that is a point that allows or denies access to a network resource based on the policy that's put in place by the policy administrator. And that PEP or policy enforcement point, it can be a firewall, it could be a router, or it could be a network switch. Pretty much a point that is like the yay or nay. You know, like once you get here, okay, do you have the right access? Are you authorized, etc., etc. And if not, you're denied. If so, come on in. You know, that's how you have to, fucking up the girls. That's how you remember that. So PEP is something that allows or blocks a system or a subject to access network resources. Again, so if you ever been on like SharePoint within your organization and you need to do something because you're cross collaborating with another org or whatever, and you go in and it's like you need to request access and it's like, oh shit, so you gotta put in like a little thing. That is a way to that's like a policy enforcement point. Like you have to have the right permissions to access this. And then, okay, you requested it. Now I'm going to go ahead, verify you are who you say you are. Also that you even have the right to know what's in here. So that's that. Then they got into some physical controls. They talked about bollards, and all of us have seen bollards. You probably just don't know what the fuck it is. I didn't even know the term. Like, the fuck is a bollard? But so I'm from Pittsburgh. I see these all the time, like downtown. It's like a cement or like a metal post that's coming like halfway up or, you know, like waist level, depending. And people are still able to like maneuver through them, but vehicles aren't. And that's the point. It's usually there to block off or brace for impact from, you know, a vehicle or something like that. But it still allows pedestrians to move through. That's what a bollard is. Like, think of, like I said, one of those posts that are sticking up, and it's usually like spaced out a couple feet. So that's what a bollard is. And they also went into like, there's 3 different kinds of bollards, but they didn't really dig deep. They just named what they are. So K4, K8, and K12 are different bollards that provide different levels of protection. And essentially, the higher you go, it's going to be more protection. So K4 is going to be probably the smallest bollard, and then that's also going to give you the least protection. They talked about guardrails in a facility. So I'm thinking like guardrails in like a data center or something like that. They said that those typically signify that this is a working area and that they're typically painted yellow or another bright, highly visible color. They also touched on control vestibules, not vegetables. I know I got a little accent, but control vestibules. Anyway, we've all seen these things. So think of when you're going into like a professional building, A hospital sometimes has them where it's like a clear walkthrough where you come up, the doors open, and then like once you're in, sometimes the door is closed, and then the next door opens. That is a control vestibule, and that's usually found in found in like a high traffic area. So that's for like crowd control. They also use it to, slow down and verify people, because sometimes you can't just walk in. Sometimes you walk in, you have to badge in, and then the door opens, or something like that. So, but that's a control vestibule. They talked about CCTV, which we all know is like the security cameras. They talked about how it's evolved. It's an older analog video technology, but we know now the cameras are pretty much all IP based, and it's like live monitoring. It's just getting sent back. But we still consider that CCTV. They talked about lighting. I think that's good to know. I'm not gonna go over that. I think the last big thing that they talked about were honeypots, and then like the different types. I know a lot of people use it like as all-encompassing term, but there's honeypots, there's honey nets, honey files, honey tokens, and I'm gonna get into all that real quick. So a honey pot, and I'm just going to read it straight from here because I don't want you to get this fucked up. I want you to really know what a honey pot is because it's important. So a honey pot is a computer file, group of files, or an unused IP address that contains fake but important information that interests a threat actor, a hacker, while monitoring their methods and providing an analysis. And then there's also like a little note that I put. So it says like, when you're setting up honeypots, ensure that they're firewalled off and can't access the actual organizational network. Because what if they fuck around, really hack that shit, and then they really have your real information? Like, oh shit, now we're stuck. So pretty much, like I said, I read the definition, but think of a honeypot as something, a lot of times hackers are looking for like login information, account numbers, socials, like stuff like that. So say you're naming this file, I don't know, login credentials, whatever, but it's all fake, so you're going to watch them, the hacker, threat actor, as they access that login credential file. You're going to monitor how they accessed it. What tools are they using? What are they doing once they access it? And you're going to be watching and recording all of this. Then you're going to go through and do an analysis on that. And that it gives you, just a small insight to how a hacker is thinking or how they're approaching these types of things. And okay, they approach it this way. They use this technique. So how do we counteract that? That's the point of a honeypot, to see what the fuck they're doing. While they're thinking that they're getting good information, it's like, nah, I'm watching you. Thank you. I appreciate you. So then it says, if there's a centralized group of honeypots, so if you have a bunch of honeypots, a bunch of files and computers that you name this, that is something that's enticing, that is considered to be a honey farm. So if you have a lot of honey pots or honey nets where it's like fake IPs and you're trying to see how they get in and stuff like that, all of that big honey mix is called a honey farm. A honey file can be used to lure attackers via file names, like we said. So credentials.txt file, or login credentials or, social security account number, whatever the fuck. Again, that is the lore, but then you're going to monitor and analyze the who, what, when, where, why of that. Like how they got in, who got in, what they used, what time was it? All of this is going to be used later. And then the last thing they talk about are honey tokens. And honey tokens are often dummy user accounts or email domains that detect, deflect, or deter unauthorized use of information systems. And a lot of times, honey tokens can be used as early warning for an active breach. Because if you know that this email domain or this user account off rip is a setup, and it's like that's being triggered and you're being notified, it's like, oh shit, we're currently in an active breach because this login is not a user account, like a general regular user account or even a privileged account. This is one that we set up to catch the motherfuckers, and you caught them. So that alerts you. It's like, okay, now you go into your next measures. But again, that's used as an early warning sometimes. And that was pretty much the bulk of chapter 2. So let me know if you have any questions, if you have any tips and tricks on how you remember some of this stuff. And also remember, there are some things that I did not go over, but I just feel like it's not as important. So like they talked about lighting, they talked about sensors, sensor types, stuff like that, barricades. I feel like that you kind of know that, like it's general knowledge type of stuff, but the meat and potatoes is what I went over. Again, I will see you next week so we can go over chapter 3. I actually think it's a short chapter, so I may or may not, depending on what I got going on, do chapter 3 and 4 together. Don't hold me to it, but I'm for sure going to do chapter 3. But all right, I will see y'all next time. All right, bye.